I would love this to be a little bit of a, ooh, there it goes. I would love this to be a little bit of an open forum. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into the field and what movement looks like in the field. And I am actually going to be, I am leaving my job and joining a new company, not this week coming, but next week coming. So I could talk a little bit about managing career transitions and some of the things I've been learning from that part of the experience. So let me go and start sharing my screen. And okay, we should just see. So you want to work in computer security. Who am I? My name is Adam O'Donnell. I am a principal engineer at Cisco Systems. That is, think of it as if you were a CTO of a 200, 300 person company type level. I am the lead architect of a new product we're just rolling out now called Cloud Mailbox Defense. It's a new email security platform, and also Cloud Email Security, which is our legacy security platform. In 2 weeks' time, or on the 20th, I will be starting at Stripe, which is a fintech startup in a security leadership position. And in my free time, I'm involved in the visual arts community. I'm a board member of a arts nonprofit. I'm involved in politics. I'm a fundraiser for rural Democrats and help out. I was on the Beto O'Rourke's finance committee for his run for presidency, and I like to cook. So what got me here? I was born and raised in Philly. I went to Central for, I don't know if anyone from this clique ended up going there. And then I went to Drexel for everything. I started in 1996 for my undergrad. I did 3 co-ops, 2 at Lucent Technology in North Jersey in RF hardware, and 1 in software at Knight Ridder, which was a newspaper publisher. So this was my total software experience through the co-op program. I did my BSE in communications and digital signal processing and finished at in 01. My master's in computer engineering focused on queuing theory in 04, and my doctorate in 2005. And Dr. Weber was on my committee. So I have the signature somewhere down on my bookshelf. To give you an idea, career-wise, how I got here, I'm 40. And I want to be very clear about the numbers so you can understand like where you can end up at what point given your age range. I didn't start working. I finished my doctorate when I was 26, so I didn't get out into the full-time workforce until that point. But when I was finishing my undergrad, I started at one of the first managed security service providers. And I'll get into what that is in 2000, 2001 time range. So that means I've been working in computer security for 20 years. I'm 41 years old. So the majority of my entire career and almost the majority of my life. I went to grad school because partially I wanted to do it, but partially because 2001 was the .com crash, and there isn't really anything the tech community has seen since then. It's almost like everything shut down. It's just completely obliterated. And there was a professor, Athena Petropoulou, who sat me down in January of 01, or in that time range. She's like, hey, have you thought about going to grad school? And I was like, well, I don't know if I can afford it. And she's like, let me explain to you how this works. And that was, and it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have ended up going to grad school. I didn't think that was that big of an option. So that's how I had this diversion into over to graduate work versus trying to struggle through the massive downturn of the first .com bust. There's a documentary called, if you're really interested in what it was like for the first .com fever, there's a documentary called .com, and it's about a company called GovWorks, GovWorks, and it kind of shows this massive fever that was around the first internet bubble, and it's very, very, it rings very, very true, and it's totally worth watching if this is something you're curious about. From 2001 to 2005, I did consulting while I was in grad school, mostly for government clients. We can put a pin in this, it's complicated, but I worked in our intelligence community, mostly working on Chinese censorship of internet traffic. When 2005 rolled around, when you go to grad school, you should ask Dr. Weber more about this, but when you go to grad school, there's these funding sources, and one of them is called a fellowship. And I was fortunate enough to receive this one fellowship that ran for 3 years, and I didn't know exactly what I was finishing. I thought there was some additional money. So long story short, I had to find a job in 2005, and I had two options. One was to go full-time CIA, and the other one was to move out to the West Coast for a startup. I didn't want to work at the company full-time during the Bush administration. And I had some friends of mine that were on the west in San Francisco, like, come out here, it's the Elysian Fields, you'll have a good time and you'll, do startup things. So I moved out here for a startup called Cloudmark. That was acquired by Proofpoint. And that was in many ways a failure of a company. And I saw things that I had never seen before and I was not really fully prepared for. And I want to give you really the nitty gritty of also, both my career, but also what you end up seeing. It was a culture where they took people out drinking heavily, like 3 or 4 nights a week, because they like the work hard, play hard culture. And I remember coming in hungover, and they offered me Ativan and Coke to straighten me out. And I don't mean Coca-Cola. It was just, they really like the smell of EA. And it wasn't created. It wasn't who I was. It's not, that wasn't me. And so in 2008, I sat down with some friends of mine at a bar in Lower Haight, San Francisco. And I said, hey, I got this idea for a company. And we kicked it around, and that became Immunet. And Immunet was the first security product to focus on what was called endpoint defense and response, which is the kind of technology set that you use when you have someone like another government trying to break into your systems. And so we built this thing, and we built it during the 2008. We started it in 2008, before the 2008 financial crisis hit. So again, another bad time to start a company. But what we ended up doing was building a technology set that was super valuable to another company called SourceFire. People were friends of ours in Columbia, Maryland. And they acquired it. We raised about $2 million, and they acquired our startup for about $20 million on the front end, $20 million on the back. So total $40 million. Now, most of that goes to investors, but it did change my lifestyle to the point that I didn't have to worry about retirement. I could buy a home, but it still had to work. And that's where I ended up for, that was 2010. Then in 2013, Cisco decided to buy SourceFire, and they gutted their entire security group at Cisco and replaced it pretty much with us. And that's how I ended up at Cisco. And I've been at Cisco for almost 7 years. And while I'm at Cisco, I take on these roles of trying to build new security products. Best way to describe it is being like Mr. Fix-It inside of a very large business, where I'm trying to take on product lines and businesses and repair them and get them back out, or handle complex negotiations with other firms. So that's a little bit about my background. Why do you want to work in this field? There's a predicted shortage of 3.5 million people in our field by 2021. And salaries are competitively higher as a result. Now that's just like working, what's a good way of putting it? It's like a working man's salary, like as you do the job, you make the money, versus if you're building a startup, you're going to make a lot, you have a higher potential of making, the proverbial fuck you money if you're building a social startup, because those things have the potential to hook up 1 billion people, and then you could do a lot of advertising across them. Security startups usually sell in the tens of millions to about $1 billion. Social companies or fintech companies, you're talking about tens of billions or hundreds of billions. And that never ends up in your pocket, but it just means that you have a higher probability of whatever you're creating to get at some some level. Active adversaries mean that the field is always changing. What's a good way of describing it? One of the first things, right after we got acquired by SourceFire, my product was deployed at a nuclear power plant, and we detected the Chinese using a new attack based around Java to compromise the control system of the power plant. And then so we had to roll out a bunch of new technology to address that. And we saw another layer coming back in. And so you're always in this fight where you're trying to predict your opponent's next move and develop new technology to counteract it. I like to compare it to the general field as being like, when you go to build a bridge, the laws of physics are pretty constant. Gravity will be the same level of gravity on Tuesday as it will be on Thursday, and the sand won't move underneath of you. But when you build software and computer security products, you're building them in a space where the ground moves up from underneath you at all times. And it's very, very hard and incredibly challenging to build up that firm land underneath you to lift you up. And the people who have been the best about it has been Apple, because they control the entire stack, and they've been able to say, we trust a single little piece of hardware, and they'll scale another piece of hardware that we trust. But even then, they still have compromises, and they're still actively fighting against it, because it's, they have, interested adversaries from around the world that want to get access to the devices. And because you're dealing with human beings on the other side of it, the field is like super cross-disciplinary. There's aspects of, psychology and sociology and computer science and electrical engineering and political science and finance. I mean, on the electrical engineering side, there was, how many of you guys know what speculative execution is in a CPU? Hopefully, good number, some of you, okay. Someone went and showed that speculative execution, because you have a speculation path, when you compute something, it will leave artifacts behind in the registers of that speculative path. And if you don't follow that path and you continue down another path, the original speculative execution data is left in the registers. And they use that to exploit a memory weakness in the computer, and then they were able to extract key material from the machine. That is fucking mind-blowing. And then for an electrical engineer thinking, I'm just trying to make CPUs go faster. Now I have to worry about every time I have a rollback on speculative execution, I need to zero out all my memory inside of registers. That's something that wouldn't occur to you. But if you have the tools of electrical engineering, some familiarity with computer science, and then some interest in how people think, you can tie all those little bits together to figure out how to either defend a system or to break into another system. Another thing is that because of the digitization of humanity, geopolitics and the movements of nations really bleed heavily into our world. When I was a young kid, let's just say electronic hoodlum on the internet, one of the people I used to interact with was a guy named Prof, P-R-O-F-F, and that's Julian Assange. So like I knew him when he was a teenager, and now he's ended up playing at this level. You end up defending against attacks that like months later you may hear about on the news as saying, unconfirmed reports from the FBI say about this. And so that your work actually has real weight and gravity to it in this field in ways that not too many other things inside of engineering I could think of actually do. And there is a little bit, I'll be direct, there's a little bit of mystique around people working computer security, so people think you're cool.
Hey, Adam, do you mind if I pause there and ask you something? Yeah. So on your last point, and I'm also interested in what the students would say about this, I have the perception that for many students outside of security, there's a perception of security as being magic, that even for engineers, even for computer scientists, it sometimes seems as a mystique to it, as I think you just said. And that's good in some sense, like if you're an insider, but it's bad from field recruiting perspective.
Mm.
And I wonder if you
Get into that.
view on that.
I will absolutely get into that and how one can access the fields. I would like to say that there's a lot of different areas upon which you can plug in. I'm going to share a website that kind of gives you some additional, in the next slide, I'll give you some additional ideas on how you can plug in. But because the problem is so large and dense, there's a lot of different subdomains to it. So let's see if I could get my mouse to come over here. If I can use it as a pointer, it's not letting me. I apologize. Okay, so you have security. Let's talk about the security domains in the middle. My one area is under the upper left. It says security architecture. Underneath of that is secure system build, secure application development, security engineering. That's my little area. There's a huge amount of space that exists just in the idea of making software that is secure or making products that make software that is secure. That's one domain. There's another domain, which is where called security operations, which is think of it as like a cross between being help desk for like my computer's down, but the help desk ticket that's coming in is another country is trying to break into this network right now, and we need to figure out what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how to defend against it. So it's like being at front of the line, attacks come in, trying to parry back. There's so many different sub-disciplines to it, it's including like engineering around it, understanding how to speed up the human process, how to understand the data that's coming back, how to reason about how to train new people up, and also active defense, which is hacking back, breaking into their networks and trying to take down what they're doing. There is a large amount of work that is around what you would call governance, which is, in a way you could think of it as like paperwork, but what it is about investigating your own company to make sure that they're fully prepared for when the event occurs. Going through making sure that each business unit has their own processes in place. How do you understand, like, what do you do if there's an attack? What's the glass that you break in case of emergency when these happen? Are you actually keeping your systems up to date? Are you communicating with the people that your other business partners that you're keeping the systems up to date? Are you, if you're Walmart and you buy a product from Box.com, is Box.com actually secure? How do you go and evaluate the people that you work with to make sure they're secure? That's an entire blob of work that is not my area of expertise, but that's a real existing blob. Other areas, risk assessment, attacking your own network to make sure that other people would find it difficult to attack. Threat intelligence, understanding like what threats exist out there, so you actually classify these things, and all these also human level type issues, such as educating your users to understand how to fend off attacks, or how you can guide other people in their career, and how you can build formal structures by which people, formal frameworks by which people go and evaluate other companies. So it's a very broad field. I can give you some commentary on how you can enter it, but I want to emphasize that because I don't touch all these things, there's other ways you can get into us beyond what I can give you advice on. So I found this one website. I want to bug some people on, some of my Twitter nerd friends, for some guidance. They pointed out this website that I thought was pretty interesting. What it is the list are the initial feeder skills that people have before they go into security. So either computer networking, software engineering, systems engineering, financial and risk analysis. So there's a good role for people who are coming from like financial audit to bleed into security, and also basic intelligence, like Here's a bunch of feeds of bad things. Where do you go next? And if you click on it, if you go to this website and you click on any of these circles, it shows you how this bleeds into a next level field and what those end up progressing through as you move through your career and the skills that you end up picking up in those areas. Again, there's like a wide range of entry points. Security engineering, I think of as like building security in products. Product engineering, which is like making products that keep people more secure. That's what I'm doing right now at Cisco. Red teaming, which is breaking into the software and systems inside your company to make sure that other people can't break into it or to find flaws before other people find them. Incident response, which is day-to-day hand-to-hand combat with breaches and attacks. Governance, risk, and compliance. And I use these three as a specific list because you'll see an acronym GRC. And so that refers to it, and as well training and user education. I would say don't go my route. This was part of my FBI file, which, I could get into what that is, but I did FOIA myself and I pulled back 20 pages. Direct guidance for you. For the love of God, finish your fucking degree. There are many a co-op company. I don't know where you're all at in your undergrad or graduate levels, but there's many a co-op companies. Like if you start doing security work, they're like, hey, why don't you stick around here and you'll make a lot of money. You don't really need a degree. Finish your degree. It's the only thing that someone can never take away from you when things go sideways in an economy. You don't know what will be the tools that will get you rehired, nor you don't know fully what the tools will be that will help you keep your position. But your Drexel degree is one thing that you can have that no matter what the state of the economy is, you get to possess and you get to keep that going forward. So that's my number one piece of guidance. And I know there's some questions popping up. I think I saw one in the chat, but I can't really get to it because I'm doing the dual screen sharing thing. Next part, I would, even if you're not in software development, you're doing more hardware things, I would recommend you hone your skills as a software developer. The world is basically being driven by code, even all hardware is. And then breaking and securing systems become far easier when you know how to build them and you know how to talk to developers about how to secure them. Don't feel that, there's this attitude sometimes where people come out of school and they're like, oh, wait a second, I didn't learn anything in school. And I have this job that has all these requirements for things, but I didn't learn this as a class. The thing I learned from Drexel is I learned how to learn. I learned how to learn really fast. There's a huge advantage to the quarter system that we all hated, or I hated, and I don't know if you may hate that as well, where it's like you have to ingest information super quickly. That will serve you in ways that you don't fully appreciate. And leverage that to start learning some of the stuff after hours. In computer security, there is a high expectation, and in software development, there's a high expectation of doing a lot of after hours learning and reading and keeping up with your field. There's a couple specific pieces of guidance I could give you. There's if you're not really familiar with basic networking stuff and trying to, take a Unix machine and get it on the internet, it's a great way to start. Start with a Raspberry Pi. They're dirt cheap. You get Pi Zero for like $10. You get like the new Pi, the newest Pi 4 is like 40 or 50. There's a device called Pi-hole, which is something that will route all your ad traffic to DevNull. Go learn how to build a firewall, what it means to build a firewall, why people do it. Like what exactly happens when traffic traverses a device, how it's analyzed, how it's inspected. Consider running Snort, which is a open source intrusion detection system, and then get familiar with the basic tools of the trade of security. There is another organized action that happens in computer security called capture the flags, where there's some objective, which is to solve a series of puzzles, and then when you solve the final last puzzle, you will retrieve this piece of data from the system. These are pretty well documented. There's a bunch of CTFs that I've run in the past. Why don't you read the history of a CTF, see what it looks like, and see what steps people went through. There's an open source journal, which is pretty snarky, but it has a lot of good content. Drexel grad Evan Sultanic is one of the editors of it. And it's called POC or GTFO, which stands for POC is proof of concept, because the old metric used to be, it's like, if you're going to exploit this, there's only one way of proving you can exploit this. You need to give me a proof of concept of that you can exploit this bug. So POC or get the fuck out means either you got it or you don't. And so it's part of the lingo of the field. Networking. This industry is super tiny. I remember when I first joined it, we used to joke around that there was maybe about 1,000 people that work in our field worldwide. It's more than that, but the core of the industry is not very big. And everyone knows who everyone else is. And it's super tight knit, has a deep, deep memory. So your name is all you really have, and your reputation is all you really have. So be kind to each other. Be aware that your reputation will follow you around. Do right by other people. After your first job in this field, you will get your jobs through your personal network. I'll caveat that in a minute, but what will end up happening is, like, your first thing, once you get in, the first thing may be hard, but once you get in, there's a lot of people that move from place to place pretty frequently, and they don't leave security as a field. It's very rare. And so what ends up happening is that the person that sits next to you or is in the same WebEx room with you, if they get promoted or they get promoted and leave, they're going to be your best job source, as well as everyone else who's jumping over to some other company. Everyone leaves the door for you open for each other if you're a decent person, and that's going to be your route where you continue to grow your career. I would highly recommend you grow your personal network through attending conferences. Some good ones, including DEF CON, Black Hat, IEEE Security and Privacy from a more academic standpoint, same with Unix security. The hallway conversations that happen at DEF CON and Black Hat are how most people grow their careers. We're not going to get to have that this year for obvious reasons, but a lot of those talks are still available online. And so if you're interested in what people talk about in the field, you can go to YouTube and pull those things down. I would highly recommend that. Finding a community of other security folks through one-on-one and personal interactions is going to be really critical, and also building a personal social media presence, which I'm sure you've heard this from other people. Certifications. This is another thing that's super big in our field. I went and I'm not a big believer in it, but I asked a bunch of people, because I also got into the field before certifications became a thing. But I asked a bunch of friends and I said, what is it, are certifications worth getting? If you're just starting out, certifications may help you get your foot in the door of hiring managers, especially if you're coming in and you don't have a connection inside the company. Some entry-level ones are Security Plus, Networking Plus, and GSEC. More advanced include CEH and CISSP. Why are certifications important is, if you look at a large company, what happens is there's a headhunter, a recruiter, that sits there and scans resumes all day long, and they get thousands of them, and they just look for keywords because they don't know anything about you. They don't know, especially if you don't have any job experience, they don't have any kind of basis to say this person's good or this person isn't good. And when they get those resumes, so that's a filter you need to get past. If you're already working in the field, or you've worked in the field as a co-op, this may not be necessary. I also would like to point out there's really strong market biases here. If you're staying in Philadelphia or you're down in DC or something like that, I've heard from a lot of people that the request for certifications is a lot more prominent. on the West Coast, no one cares. The best certification you get on the West Coast is being a dropout from Stanford. It's not, it's just it's a very different world. And so you really need to think about, like, if you're planning on being in Seattle or Boston or Austin or some other geographic location in the country, try to go and suss out what the actual market desires are in that geographic location. This only really matters when you're just starting out or your first couple years of your career. This is something that I think, I don't know if Harish said this to me, but someone else said this to me when starting out. No one cares what you've done. The only thing people will care about is what you've done in the past 5 years. Much beyond that, it doesn't matter. So 10, 15 years out, it's a good, you should be grateful you have your degree, but people are not going to be looking for your degree. They're going to be looking for what your work experience was in the past 5 years. In conclusion, if you enjoy cross-disciplinary work and you have a slightly criminal mindset, this is the field for you. There's a bunch of entry points, and E and CS education will really prepare you well. You are going to absolutely need to continue your education after you walk through the doors of the university. And that will always be true. I have a doctorate. I am 41 years old. I am still reading and still learning and still trying to keep up on the technology sets. And it happens every 5 years. Like such a new set of tools roll out that every 5 years I end up like, holy crap, this is all brand new to me. What I do find is that everything gets easier each time you relearn it, because most of the times you're just coming up with a new abstraction layer. Expect to do a fair bit of networking or possibly pick up a certificate before your career begins. If you already had co-ops in like an IT shop, you could go and give them a call and say, hey, you have anything on the, in the SOC desk or in security. Yeah, I really love it. I have a great time in it. Just, if you want to, you can follow me on Twitter. There's some other Drexel people that are on there. I found a couple. A bunch went in, a large number end up going down to, they end up going down to Fort Meade. So they end up being super quiet about what they end up doing. But you get them finding them, on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Yeah, I want to open up for questions and more of a discussion. I know that was more. Let's see if I can stop sharing here. That was a lot of ranting for a short period of time, but yeah. I have one direct private question. Would be system administration has any relationship to these domains? Yes. If you system in a machine, you end up patching it pretty heavily. And if you end up patching it, that means you're doing it to mostly secure the device. So hopefully that answers your question. I could also talk about political fundraising. And also for everyone, let me go and type this out here. My handle is this. That's my link on Twitter. Yeah, you can follow me there. You could also direct message me questions on there, and I could do the best I can to answer them. Raj, you have some questions. And if anyone wants to ask me a question privately or not privately, I can call on you, let me know. You guys can come off of mute.
Yeah, sure. What technologies are you learning right now?
So I built this new product at Cisco, and I ended up building it off of the serverless AWS stack. So I ended up using a lot of Lambda functions and some of the new databases. So I ended up playing with a bunch of Dynamo stuff, and then they're doing, the way we build things now, they have this thing called infrastructure as code. So we ended up writing a lot of CloudFormation code to stand up and spool up the system. Another thing, not just technology-wise, I'm learning. I've been reading this book. Typed in the name there. It's called The First 90 Days. It's about leadership transitions. So it's almost like you have to retool for the job you're taking and not expect to apply the tools that got you to where you are today for your job.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, what else we got here? What's the demographic like in the security field? It's super mixed. I wouldn't say you don't run into too many people over the age of 50, mostly because the field didn't really, there's a lot of computer hoodlums from the 90s that built the security field. And to be a computer hoodlum in the 90s, you had to be a teenager back then. So you kind of age out to that point. I would say on the young side, it's like from straight out college all the way up to early mid 50s. Demographic is a more young. Regarding colleagues I've been working with for a while, I mean, I work with, to give you an idea of how long people stay in the field, I'm going over to Stripe, and they recruited me directly on LinkedIn. They like recruiter ping is like, look, we're looking for leaders that come in here and help teach the juniors how to build security products. The guy who's running it is a guy named Niels Provost, and he reviewed my doctoral thesis back 15 years ago because he was 1 year ahead of me over at University of Michigan finishing his. So age-wise, it's super spread, but you will keep running into the same people over and over and over again. How do we know what to learn first? Learn what, we have multiple, so one of the questions was from Ensh, is that correct? Anish? Please feel free to correct me.
Yeah, you got it right.
Which one was it?
Ansh.
Okay, cool. With multiple entry points from sysadmin, networking, pen testing, CTF, how do we know where to learn first? Learn any of them, you'll still grow because you're still gonna need to learn the other ones. It's not like it's an either or situation. Pick up as much as possible. I would say if you're passionate about it, let that drive your decisions about what to learn next. If you find yourself getting super interested, it's like, oh, I want to dig down this hole and go down this hole and go down this hole and go down this hole.
So would you recommend like learning multiple things at sort of a reasonable pace, or just being passionate about one thing, doing that till you're proficient in it and then moving on to the next?
What works for you? I think you need to accept what your own learning style is, if that makes sense.
Right.
For some of us, I'm someone who likes to spend a couple hours on something and dive deep into it, and I jump over to something else because it helps me understand, the contrast helps me understand the first thing, and it helps the first thing sink in. That's more something I've learned about how I learn. I think one thing I would recommend for you is that it's accept in yourself how you learn, and don't when you hear other people say, oh, I spent 40 hours just reading this book and I became a fucking master at it. That may not be the way that you learn, and it may not be what speaks best to you for how you go and pick up things. So honor yourself and how you learn and what works best for you, rather than trying to jam yourself into how someone else learns best for them.
Right. Thank you.
I had a few more questions.
Yeah. Can you come closer to the microphone?
Actually, I don't know if I can. Can you still?
Yeah, you're a little distant.
Oh, okay, my bad. But anyway, when it comes to like the computer security field, would you recommend taking on a wider breadth of knowledge or focusing on a specific part of it before going into the career path?
I think a lot's going to end up being decided by the first job you get, and what becomes available to you. Like that initial match is going to be dictated by so many different factors. Luck, where you are geographically, who your first employer is, the kind of work that exists, and the kind of industries that are around you. So it's not, I wouldn't say there's a super formulaic approach for you. Like, for example, if you're in New York, there's going to be a lot of work that's around finance. And so that may end up being a lot of compliance type work or governance type work and internal testing type work. If you're on the West Coast and you're in the startup area, there's a lot of work called AppSec, which is securing, web apps and apps that are on mobile devices. So the work ends up being pretty variable. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention was, if you've ever done software quality QA work, where you're working in a software shop and you're breaking software, that's also a really good route into security, because that's, breaking software in general is a generic case of breaking it for a security problem. So you see a lot of people get picked up out of QA work and then move into like a security consultancy, bounce around for a couple of years skilling up, and then they go full time somewhere.
Cool. Just in general, what motivated you to pursue a doctorate instead of going into industry right away with the connections that Drexel has?
The economy was in shambles. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to have it. I wanted to do the work on it. I think that if I did it when I was older, I would have had a lot more emotional maturity when I've approached it. But I think that there was a time opportunity. The alternative was bad. I didn't want to go full time to the CIA, and there's a lot of good reasons for it. Like, the decisions that we end up making in life are a function of a lot of complex pieces of data. It's not always, it's like one answer for something. I would say that I would not say it's helped my career, but I would say that the skills I learned during it definitely helped my career. I find that when someone finishes with a bachelor's degree in general, they can focus on work for 3 weeks to about a month alone. They have a master's degree, they can focus on work for a few months alone. If they have a doctorate, they could take on a multi-year project without an end in sight and minimal supervision to get it done.
Adam, I hope you don't mind me quoting you. Actually, have a rather crystal clear memory of talking with you about this about 15 years ago, whenever it was that you were wrapping up. And I recall you saying something on the lines of that one of the things that had motivated you to pursuing a PhD was to go from just becoming a tool user to becoming a tool maker. And I wonder, 15 years later, if you feel that advice still holds any water for you.
I think that what I just said about the length of time is pretty much where it comes from. And I think that I would say something slightly broader than that now. I think it gives you the perspective to help other people learn how to make the tools. It's probably a good way of putting it. So it's gotten to the point that I am now coaching teams and leading large efforts and helping people grow. And I think that the doctorate absolutely helped me in that, because I see, like I said, as you add more education, you start plotting further out. You see further out in the chess game. You see where the world's going, and that's the skill that's the kind of skill that say I can plot out a multi-year research effort is the same kind of skill that says I could plot out a multi-year product development effort that's able to face a market, plus coach these 60 to 80 engineers into understanding how to build these things. So even more broadly, Stephen. Raj, what is the way to get into things like industrial IoT security? There'll be plenty more attacks on plants, power systems, things of this nature. Um, I would say the simple answer is that the world runs on Unix. If you learn how to break a Unix system, you'll learn how to break the specific Unix systems that exist inside of a industrial control system. The reason why industrial control is hard to secure, and this is where engineering constraints are not always technical. In fact, I very rarely run into engineering constraints that are technical and more personal. I was in Italy talking to a operator, a large oil company, and they wanted to avoid what happened to them with what happened to Saudi Aramco. The Iranians pretty much shut down oil production at Saudi Aramco through a piece of malware. And so I was talking to them, and they said, well, we have this refinery. The technology hasn't been patched or updated in 10 years. And I asked them why. It's like, we don't own it. Because of the way our oil company works, we lease it from someone else who owns it. And we can only put in requests for them to fix things for certain reasons. Their financial incentives are based around total output. We have no real control over them except via these lease agreements. So what ends up happening is you have to come up with a security solution that can be applied by a third party that doesn't interrupt production, and that the people who actually own the plant don't want to manage. So the solutions that end up happening in the real world from a security perspective aren't because we don't know how to secure these things or we can't build these things that are fully secure. It's just that the other economic drivers of why the systems exist the way that they are prevent the kind of security solutions you wish you could create. And so you end up coming up with these very constrained engineering options to try to apply some level of remediation. I hate to say that's why I say, like, if you learn the Unix stuff and how things break, it'll all be applicable to the IoT stuff. But if you want to say, I want to secure IoT, the reason why IoT is not secure is not because of a technology problem. It's because the financial structures are misaligned to securing those machines. Yeah, what else?
I guess I could ask another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. So, as someone well versed in security, is there any tips that you'd offer, like the everyday person, for making sure they're more secure with their devices or software?
Against what?
Just in general, like I've seen a bunch of different things, like Chinese spyware, like just hacking in general, or other things like that of that nature.
The DNC has a really good security guide for candidates. I highly recommend that. Use what's called a YubiKey. I don't know if you've ever seen these things. Or a second hardware factor for authentication. Put everything on Gmail. Require two-factor on everything you have. That would be step one. Step two, get rid of all your Android devices. Use iOS as much as you can. Or a Chromebook. Those are excellent. If you use a Chromebook and then a second factor and you're in the Google ecosystem, that solves like 99% of things or more. You have to really think about what the threat model is. Like when in 2018, we had, there was a Republican candidate, Dana Rohrabacher, in Southern California, and he was joked around as Putin's favorite congressman, because for some reason he kept on slipping in all these things in the bills that would actually go and favor Russia. Somebody attacked the wife of the presumptive Democratic nominee's home work computer to get access to her personal email to try to exploit her personal email to eventually try to exploit the Democratic candidate's email. where I'm trying to go from this is like, if your threat is Mossad, they're going to be doing Mossad things. There's not too much, not too much you really defend against there. But if you're worried about, daily malware up into a nation state threat where they don't want to burn a 0-day on you and below $1 million trying to pop your iPhone, YubiKey, Google for your email, an iOS machine like an iPad or an iPhone or a Mac that's fully updated, that's probably your best bet. Or a Chromebook. Chromebooks are great. Anything else?
Podcast you like?
Podcasts I like. Snap Judgment. I don't know. I anything from NPR. If it's a security one, Dennis Fisher has one. Hold on. I actually did an interview on that one. There was a Fisher. Hey, go look this up 1 second. I'll throw it in. Oh, it's called a Decipher podcast. Yeah, that could be worth listening to. And Dennis is he's a great guy. There's an interview with me on that one. A book came out about my friends and I last year, and so he had me on there. So get to hear a little bit more about my background if you're so interested. But he does a lot of good content. Book wise, what can I recommend? A friend of mine just see if I can find it. It's on the shelf. A friend of mine just came out with a book that's very good. A lot of people raving about. One sec. And her name is Heather Atkins. Oh, sorry. I'm actually meaning to type these out in a group chat. 1 second. So it's a Decipher by Dennis Fisher. Atkins. It's called something like Building Secure and Scalable Systems or something. Oh, yeah. This is actually a freebie online. A lot of people, I have a copy of it, I started reading it. A lot of people were raving about it. Yeah, what else? There's a lot of deep lore to the security community too, and a lot of books that kind of inform that lore. I'm trying to think of fiction and nonfiction. Same with movies. Fiction-wise, what else? Snow Crash. And there's a bunch of other books. These are all came out in the 80s. But what happens is like all the security kids read these things and they got really into it, and then they end up building an industry around it. Yeah, what else? Anything else you guys can think of?
Hi, Adam. Just want to state, like, first of all, that like central people just like can't avoid them. I feel like every new person I meet, it's like 50-50 chance they went to Central. But I guess my question for you is that like sometimes employers might ask, like, how do you stay in the loop of like security information? And the first thing that comes to my mind is like, NIST or ISO. But is there any that you would recommend or that you utilize to stay in the loop for security vulnerabilities?
Twitter and conferences. DEF CON, Black Hat, personal networks. What you're going to start out and you'll be reading mailing lists and things like that, and following people you don't know on Twitter. After a couple of years, you'll be the person making the news if you're in the industry. You're going to have informal networks that exist on Slack or Signal of people passing around information about attacks. And so at first, it's about, yes, you'll be consuming the content strictly as a consumer. As you grow, you'll be part of peer-to-peer networks. And that's really how most of that information is exchanged. If it comes out on the mailing list, it's already old, and it's past tense. So when you're getting started, hop on Twitter, take a look at all the past DEF CON talks, the past Black Hat talks, things from security and privacy. I mean, just basically queuing up YouTube and watching it. But take a look who gives those talks and see what they're talking about online. Start following them on Twitter because they all have super social media presences, and they'll start talking about different security things. There's a heavy overlap between security people and radical left politics. So a lot of that's taken over a good chunk of that feed right now. But there's that would be my main guidance. And that's how you keep up like the baseline of the field. And then individual attacks, you'll see people talking about an incident on Twitter, for example. And if you're following incident response Twitter, they'll be swapping samples, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Blockchain. Blockchain is dead. And I'll be direct. Blockchain, I think, was mostly what to say about it? I would challenge you to come up a real engineering need for blockchain. And most of the time you come up with the engineering need and very quickly you settle upon having a large centralized database, which actually fits that need. The reason why blockchain became so noisy is that what's a good way of putting this? We live in a super low interest rate world, and people with shit tons of money need a place to generate money because of pension plans and greed. And they dump it into venture capitalists. And the venture capitalists are what am I going to dump money into? And they need to show some level of return. And also when they fund a year's fund, they also need to make the investments from that fund within a fixed period of time. So then you have Bitcoin getting really hot because you have a bunch of people in Eastern Europe that want to smuggle their money out. So they're like, oh, well, if Bitcoin's hot, then the blockchain must be hot too. And so people just threw buckets of money into the blockchain, and nothing of any engineering value has ever come out of it. I have not seen it's years of it. Cisco had a blockchain unit, we shut it down. IBM had one. I don't know if that thing's even useful, but it's basically a write once, poor performance distributed database. And it's not super clear what the killer application is for it other than cryptocurrency. And the main killer application for cryptocurrency is speculation and money laundering. So it's an artifact of globally poor tax policy and lack of understanding how investment can actually lead to economic growth. That's a little bit of almost verging on the Marxist interpretation of it, but it's you'll get other people who have different opinions of it, but I haven't seen anything different from that. Do I think a GDPR bill will come in the States at some point? Yes, we have one in California. With the hopefully with the upcoming administration, we will see that at a federal level. I suspect it'll be state by state, and then after a while being state by state, you're going to have a federal one just to be able to normalize it, make business easier. If there is a change in administration in November, they have a pretty full plate, and the question is how much they're going to be able to get through in a year and a half, because that's the full season for legislating in December or in DC. Anything else? I got some extra time, so it's not like a hard limit of 5, but I know some of you mentioned that you had some interest in security before this. I mean, feel free to speak up if you have any interest in security. You know, if you had one before this, or like what else your thoughts on quantum computing. I don't understand it. I'm sure it does some. I'm sure it works. I think it's magic. I don't understand it.
What are your thoughts on cloud computing?
Everything's there. Thank you, Stephen. And I know you got to take off. Thank you for setting it up. Hopefully that was helpful.
It was very helpful, but I had nothing to do with setting it up. That all goes to Celine and her great team. So Adam, thank you so much. This meant a lot. Please keep the conversation going. I have to run, but all of you should keep going as long as Adam can hold you here. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I got nothing going on. So
Thanks, Dr. Weber.
thank you. Everything's going to the cloud. Oh, you know what's be useful to you guys? There's a couple other books that I think you should read. And I told Stephen you should make everyone read them, but hold on.
I'm adding to my reading list every time you mention books.
If you're in technology, everyone should be reading The Innovator's Dilemma. It is the one tech book or one business book I think every engineer should read. And basically, it's about how you build new technology inside of a pre-existing business, and like what the financial and economic constraints are. So I highly recommend that. It behooves you to start picking up whatever the popular fucking business books are at the time and start reading those, mostly because not because you're going to go and shift fields, but you can at least understand where the gibberish that's coming out of a salesperson's mouth is, or a marketing person's mouth, where it actually comes from, because they read the same books, and you can develop the same language to be able to speak to them.
And if there's one thing cloud companies like to do, it's sell things.
It's sell things. But let me talk about why cloud stuff's important. Once upon a time, you would buy a box that did something, right? And you would keep that box for 3 years and you would throw it away. And what that box was is called CapEx, capital expenditure. So you buy this box, it costs you an amount of money, and you internally account for that and depreciate it downwards alongside your business. With cloud stuff, and particularly SaaS companies, software as a service, it comes as OpEx. They charge you a fixed number of dollars for each person that uses the product. So what ends up happening is that from a business perspective, as your number of users goes up, your costs go up. And so you're able to scale your costs in line with your revenue, and makes your revenue and your costs a lot more predictable. So it's really that business pricing revolution that made, if cloud was really, hey, you could give us $30,000 up front in the cloud versus $30,000 on-prem, there isn't a big difference. But by going to cloud, it's like, hey, just give us $1 a month for each person using it. That's an easier sell. And it's easier to deliver with a cloud system. Intel's management, was that lights off management, Raj? I have no idea. I haven't popped a machine in a long time. AI is reaching, in my opinion, a little bit of a plateau. There's a big jump that was made about 10 years ago. Take care, some of our people are taking off. There's a big jump that was made like 10 years ago of deep learning, but I think that the next major jump needs to be around the ideas of, excuse me, it's like a deeper level of cognition, because AI is very good at saying, I've seen this situation before, and therefore I know how to handle it. But if you don't have the root data to provide the situation we've seen before, it's not going to be able to handle it. So why does that win? Or who wins in those games? Anyone who's got boatloads of data, Facebook, Google, huge volumes of it allows for, machine learning training. With all these buzzwords being thrown around, is there a specific thing you're looking at to become the next big tech thing? No. Nope. I think that, you see big tech things happen when new platforms come out, or new pricing models come out, like somewhat technical, but not super technical. You got a big jump when this thing came out because, you have a portable computer with a high-speed internet connection and a generic interface. That's a big thing. I know a bunch of people are working in AR right now, AR and VR right now, but I think the hardware is probably about 10 to 20 years out. I don't know what like next big thing is going to be. Apple's move for ARM will transition the laptop industry to ARM, no, but Apple's going to do some badass shit with the ARM stack. Because they control the entire stack, they could do dynamic power consumption stuff. They could do really interesting things security-wise. They can, you can have like the iDevice in general is the most secure thing you can get your hands on, especially the later versions of it. And they're able to have a lot more control about what security techniques they build into the hardware, into the CPU, that also recognizes the security of the overall hardware around it. That's something that a non-integrated vendor can do. I say that with a little bit of guidance on. I was on the board of my buddy's startup who he had a startup that focused on finding vulnerabilities in binaries or finding third-party code in binaries, and then the startup disappeared, and he all those people working at Apple, and that person is now guiding a lot of Apple security decisions, and I'm super excited about that. Question about Android. There's no one person responsible for securing it. And because there's so many different vendors involved, there's no real interest in keeping the thing up to date.
I mean, the fact that they just had to outright tell them stop messing with the kernel is a pretty big giveaway.
Yeah. No, exactly. What else? By the way, what year is everyone in?
I'm a third year.
Third year? Sophomore.
I'm a freshman.
Sweet. Oh my God. Awesome. Okay. So you're super, what are the co-ops programs looking like right now for security? Is there options in there or what?
So there were some options in A round for co-op. So like I personally took the one at SIG, and I got into the firewall services team.
So Susquehanna Investment Group?
Yeah.
I'm currently working at the University of Pennsylvania as a junior systems administrator, and I had something with the government. I applied last year. So pro tip, if you're going to do anything with the federal government that requires a clearance, apply over a year in advance and let your co-op people know. Otherwise, you'll end up in my situation where they're not sure if Drexel will allow me to take the job without facing sanctions.
Is it down at the fort?
Yeah.
So
who knows at this point?
Go onto LinkedIn and look up Jim Penrose. He was the same year as I was. Jim's a really good guy. He was down at the fort for a long time. And he's in private industry right now. So yeah, I think to say, hey, Adam O'Donnell, I saw us talk by Adam. You know, I heard that you did the co-op where you went down south, and could you talk, would you be able to talk about experiences in my background? He's now in private industry, so he's able to probably talk a little bit more clearly, but yeah, go hit him up. I already talked to him and said, I may be sending some students his way, so.
Thank you.
No problem.
Oh yeah, if anyone wants to work at UPenn, unfortunately there's a hiring freeze there, so they cannot hire any more co-ops in upcoming rounds. That's lifted.
You're in Cali for non-computer security. Darius, where are you at? El Segundo. Oh, you're down south. Yeah, I'm in San Francisco. So the song, wasn't it a Tribe Called Quest? I left my wall in El Segundo. Anyways. Yeah. Anything else you would like to talk about? Oh, here's a. If I get bored, this is the book that my friends and I were in. Cola de Cal. One of the people that was in my hacker group was is Beto O'Rourke, and so when he did his Senate run, I ended up fundraising for him. And after we did that, we ended up fundraising for 12 different House candidates. One thing that helps with fundraising is having a lot of friends that made a shit ton of money doing tech work. And then after that, you know, just all kind of shook out from there.
Have you ever gone and done in-person advocacy, like at the House or the Senate?
No, I have a lot of social anxiety. So I've helped organize protests. I've helped build technology for them. I may have gotten a little bit, you know, yeah, but generally I don't go face to face. But I am able to get to the point that I'm able to get the right email from the right person in the right person's hands. And that's more the level I like to operate at. But yeah, I started with Beto, and then we did a bunch of congressional stuff. And then this year we have a congressional project and a state level project to try to break Republican trifectas in southern states before redistricting post-census happens. Anything else? Sweet. There's right to repair stuff. I haven't been following that. I know the EFF does a lot of work on the right to repair work. So I would recommend reaching out to them. I think that there's, and that group is EFF. I think there may be a political consensus that's actually developing around the right to repair, because you see farmers who are buying older tractors right now because they want to be able to keep them up to date, and they have lockouts on them that say that they won't allow the thing to be repaired unless it's from an authorized service center. And farmers don't really have any interest in that shit because they live in the middle of nowhere, and they're not hauling a tractor to some repair shop. And so there's a place on the right that is actually looking for a right to repair, and a place on the left that's also looking for a right to repair.
If there are no other questions, Darius, do you want to stop the recording? There's another question.
Yep. My user Linux. I have a Raspberry Pi running Linux in the garage for something, but otherwise I use a Mac, which is running, you know, OS 10. But I started using Linux in like 94. I was like a kid. It was only available in stacks of floppies. You need to load each one onto the machine. Yep. So, yeah. I guess thanks everyone. You know, you can cancel the recording. Did you stop the recording? No, not yet. Okay. Thanks everyone. Have a good time. You hit the stop button on the recording now.